Hey crafting friends, Jessica here with Tiny Worlds of Wonder, stopping in to share part 2 of a tutorial I started recently in this beautiful book, Colors of the Jungle from Colorit. I have been working on this gorgeous African Swallowtail, and I have been posting 800 pictures on Instagram, and it's not even done yet. I'm having so much fun with it. The paper in this book is just awesome. I have been using a ton of water media on this and it's just holding up great. So be sure to follow on Instagram because that's where you're going to find most of my finished coloring pages. I don't do a lot of coloring and I'm by no means an expert compared to some of the people out there. Holy cow. But I do love to share some things over there. So if you're interested in seeing this or any other page all finished up, that's where you're going to find it. It's at Tiny Worlds of Wonder. I did a full flip through of this book recently. I'll stick a link up in the cards up top so you can find it. And after that flip through, Colorit reached out to me and said, hey, do a giveaway. We'll send one of your viewers a copy of this book as long as they live in the US. And I was like, that's amazing. Let's do it. So you guys, Colorit is going to send one of my US viewers a free copy of Colors of the Jungle. If you would like to be entered in that giveaway, all I need you to do is comment below with your current work in progress. Give me a general idea of what's on the page. I could say like picture of a butterfly for this one, and then tell me what book it's in. So what are you coloring and what book is it in? I am a Colorit affiliate, so if you're interested in this book as we go along, I will put a link in the description below. You can find it there. I do earn a small commission when you purchase it through the link. You're helping me pay my student loans off, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am for that. Let's get into the tutorial today. So my first tutorial was about planning my color scheme and my basic outline for the page. Here are some things you're going to need for today's tutorial. You will need your coloring tools. I'm using the 36 set of Derwent Inktense plus some extras that I've purchased along the way. My absolute favorite source for Inktense is Blick Art Supplies. I'm also an affiliate for Blick Art Supplies, so I'll stick that link in the description too. So I'll earn a small commission if you purchase through that link as well. But the thing I love about Blick Art Supplies is they offer a lot of singles Derwent Inktense at a really great price. So that is literally where I've purchased all of my spares that didn't come in the 36 set. You will also need your reference photo. Shout out to Sara Folts at The Butterfly Babe for this beautiful photo that I'm going to be using as I color this page. I also have the color scheme that I planned out in part 1. I'm going to keep that kind of handy just so I can remember my colors. I've got my swatches of all the Inktense colors that I own just in case I need those. I have some water brushes. I'll link something similar in the description so you can find those. And a sharpener. I just have my Prismacolor. And your coffee, because coloring and coffee go hand in hand. Last but not least, you will need a blotting tool. Okay, so have those things handy if you're using Inktense. So what we're going to focus on today is really, I think for me and my process, the most essential step. We're going to be working on blocking in our color values. And like I said, I am by no means an expert colorist. I am not a professional artist. I'm positive I do a ton of things wrong, but this to me is a really essential step because it allows me to see where my light and shadows fall quickly and easily, and I know where I'm going to go for my next step, my kind of finishing step. So let's get started. I'm going to grab all the colors that I need for my butterfly. If you recall, on our last step, I picked Tangerine, Willow, and Baked Earth for my oranges. Then I decided we need some browns, so I chose Willow and Ink Black, and then Bark, Ink Black, and Indian Ink for our blacks. And I will try to go through those again as I go. For my leaves, the ones I have done here already, I have used two color combos really. I used apple green, felt, leaf green, and oak for the kind of more brown leaves, the ones with brown undertones. And then I used a little hint of baked earth, apple green, felt, and deep indigo blue for some of the leaves as well. I'm going to go ahead and start on one of our wings here. We'll see how far we get today. Coloring videos tend to be long. We'll see how much memory my phone has today. And I'm going to start with Sicilian Yellow because I'm going to start blocking in my colors from light to dark. So I have my reference photo here. It's kind of sitting off camera. But what I'm going to do is start to block in my colors kind of in a general way. Now there are more lines on this wing for sure than on my actual swallowtail here. But that's okay because in coloring pages, you can ignore some lines. It's kind of my favorite thing to do, actually. We don't need to pay attention to all the lines. We can color over some of them. So I'm going to go from Sicilian Yellow there. I'm also going to block in a tiny bit of Sicilian Yellow going up the center here. I'll link to this reference photo down below in case you guys want to use it too. And then let's go ahead and hit some yellow on our body here. So the outside of this little noodly bit. What's this bit on a butterfly called? I don't even know. It's the only part of the butterfly I don't really like. It kind of creeps me out. The bum end of the butterfly, I guess. I don't know. So this kind of has a light yellow butterfly bum. Now I'm going to go ahead and activate those just because I know I'm going to blend over the top of them. So I'm just going to hit that with a little water. Now remember, when you're using Inktense, you always want to work, if you're blending, from light to dark. I'm not really blending here per se, but if I had two colors, I'd always be working from light to dark. I love how Inktense just magically come to life as you start working on them. All right, so here comes the tricky part a bit, because some of the areas on this butterfly are like truly orange. Some of them are really brown. I'm gonna start with Willow. So Willow is really a brown, and I'm going to work just a little bit of that up into my wing area here because that's what I see. That's what I see in my reference photo. So we're gonna follow our eyes on this. One tip I have for new colorists, if you're just getting started, is trust your eyes. If you're looking at a reference photo and you see a color you did not expect to see, go with it, because you will be amazed at what colors your eyes actually see when you start to observe the real world and not just what you expect to see. I'm going to go for Baked Earth here. Baked Earth is like a real terracotta sort of color, and I think that really fits with what I'm seeing here. I'm going to kind of ignore some lines and go back and forth. So what I'm doing here is really creating light layers. I can't go back in with Inktense an unlimited number of times, but I can go back in a couple of times. Oops. That was not actually the color I intended. I can go back in a couple of times and darken things up. Maybe 2 or 3. Beyond that, I find you can test your paper, but beyond that, it's pretty hard to keep the paper intact in most coloring books. So I'm kind of going back and forth between Willow and Baked Earth. I added a tiny bit of Tangerine by accident, but we're just going with it. We'll blend it out. Now, if I was really concerned about making my butterfly symmetrical, I would do both sides at once, and I actually would strongly encourage you to do that. I'm, for the sake of time, not going to do that. I might be sorry later. We'll see. So as we get a little farther out on this butterfly wing, what I'm seeing is a trend toward a browner color. So it's a little more orange toward the center. And then it's moving toward a little browner shade as we get out further. So I'm going to follow my eyes there and what they're telling me to do. And I'm basically ignoring a lot of these lines. It would be amazing to do kind of a fantasy coloring with all of these lines in different colors. That'd be super cool. But I'm going for more of what my reference photo tells me in this case. I'm going to blend in a little baked earth just so we don't get too brown here. We're not too monochromatic toward the end of our wing here. And then I'm actually going to blend in just a tiny bit of Sicilian Yellow too, because at the end of this wing I do see a tiny bit more of a yellow undertone in the color. Okay, so let's go ahead and activate that. I like to work in as small sections as I can find. I usually make my brush medium wet, not dripping, but also not dry. And I'm just going to work in kind of back and forth motions. I call it advance and retreat. So go forward a bit, blend back a bit, then dab off if I notice I'm getting just a little too much color saturation. That orange is so pretty. That tangerine was it was a good mistake actually. A good mistake. So I find that this paper takes Inktense very well. It does tend to, it's got a bit of a coating on it, so the color does tend to float above the surface of the paper a bit, which makes it activate a little bit longer than on more porous papers. That just means I sometimes have to go back and brighten my colors up because I've actually washed a bit of them off the top of the paper. Okay, I'm going to let that dry totally before I fiddle too much more with it. Let's go in. I'm going to do, just following my reference photo-ish here, I'm going to grab my Willow again, and I'm going to do a couple more areas here, just blocking in my basic colors. Add a little bit of baked earth. And then just a tiny bit of my Sicilian Yellow. When you have a picture with a lot of lines like this, I find the blocking step is even more essential. So I'm not really worrying about laying down my brightest final colors yet. I'm sort of just getting an idea of where I want these to lay. Okay. Let's move to our kind of brightest oranges on here. So I'm using the same three colors, but I am going to use a little more of the tangerine to do these kind of V-shaped elements here. Butterflies are so pretty. They're a really fun subject to color, and I love that this book actually has 2 or 3 really pretty butterfly images to work with. So when I'm laying in new colors, what I basically do is color along the edge of my last color. So I get a bit of a gradient. Now it's going to be really quiet because my furnace kicked off. It is April, but it's definitely still furnace weather in Montana. But we're getting there. We're definitely getting there on some some more spring days. The tulips have started to peek their little heads up. Not their heads, their leaves. All right, I'm going to go ahead and activate those. And on those areas, like I said, I'll work from light to dark. That tangerine is a fun pop of orange. It's a nice color. I think I mentioned in my other video that tangerine is really the only true orange that I have in my set. The rest are kind of orangey browns. But you can do a lot with a few colors, especially with Inktense, because you can layer them kind of endlessly, I think. All right, so I've got that color blocked in. I also see some orange in kind of this middle area. One of the spots is definitely more truly orange than the others. So I'm gonna stick to what I see. And I'm gonna go for Tangerine is the light color, Baked Earth for the medium orange, and then Willow is more of a brown. So that's kind of the order I'm layering those in. I'll do a tiny bit of tangerine on these others. I always have to look at the names on my pencils because when I hold them all in my hand, it's easy to mix them up. Another thing I love about Inktense is that you don't have to be particularly careful about blending. I mean, you want to aim for blending, but if your blending isn't perfect, especially on paper like this that's not very porous, you're still going to end up with a pretty decent blended look. And definitely on Inktense, the smaller the section you're working on coloring book paper, the easier it is. These leaves are actually a bit of a struggle to blend because they're so big. All right. If this is dry enough, this first section, I'm going to go in and make it a little more orange. I'm going to add a little more there. And then I'm just going to darken up some of my colors with a second layer. Normally I might wait and do all my color blocking first before I take that step, but I know I'm going to want to when I look at this. So because I'm just not happy with how dull she's still looking there. You do, though, before you add additional layers, want to make sure that your first one is really dry, because it will not work very well if you're working wet again. There we go. Okay. And then the only other orange I really see on this section is a little bit here, and the rest is honestly black. So again, I'll do a little tangerine. I make these a little bit browner than the others. Closer this image goes to the center of the body, kind of the more burnt orange the image actually looks. Okay, just for fun and for symmetry, I might make this guy orange too. Sometimes if I want a darker version of the color I'm working with, I actually color over everything with my lightest shade. And that can kind of serve to blend several colors together and kind of tone the other ones. So that we're all kind of in the same color family. Breaking my own rules, going dark to light there. All right, so what I'm gonna do next is go in with my blacks. So my blacks for this are going to be, Indian ink is definitely a little browner. I'm gonna try some bark, which is a really warm brown. Ink black is truly black, but it's more on the warm side. All right, now I encourage you to get to know your blacks because not all blacks are created equal. In this set, charcoal gray is actually the darkest black of all, and it's a gray. But I'm going to be using ink black and Indian ink, and those two have slightly different properties. So that's why swatching them out can be really helpful. Indian ink works better for me when I'm trying to get some gray. And that's what I'm going to do over here. And I'm going to use kind of a lighter touch on the edge of this because I do want this to look more gray than black. Derwent definitely is pressure sensitive, so the more color you lay down, the darker and more intense your color gets. So I want the outside edge of my wing to be a little bit more gray. And then the veins are going to be truly black. You know, I might just continue with that, and then I'll layer other colors on top. I'm going to layer up over a little bit of that Willow or Baked Earth, was it, that I put down earlier? The thing you also want to do at this stage is reserve your white. So I am going to reserve some white in this area of the wing. This drawing, the illustration isn't exactly like the photo, of course, because it's not based on the photo, but we'll do a little translation almost between the two. Okay, so the more I do this, the more I'm thinking like I'm just going to block in this Indian ink on just about everything because it's kind of my lightest black. And then I'm going to make some areas more intense later on. Now, this may horrify you if you are a lover of line work, but I'm going to ignore a huge number of the outlines in this. I'm going to use my shading to kind of define those later on. I might actually make that little spot orange when I come back to it. I find that sometimes having really, really sharp pencils can actually make doing big areas like this a lot harder. You can see I'm not too worried about like making my color perfectly even as I go. Depending on your paper, you have to lay these colors down more evenly or less evenly. So doing a little test can be a really good idea. Okay, and I'm going to hit these guys with black too, these spots. So this is exactly what I mean by blocking in my values first. Basically, I want a rough idea of where the colors go and what I need to reserve as I go along. Okay, I'm going to come back in with a little bit of Tangerine actually. I'm just going to orange up that spot a little bit there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is find my darkest blacks, and I'm going to make those really nice and dark. The ink black is what I'm going for to help me out with that. And I'm going to use a lot of pressure to get those really dark and intense. I do find sometimes that getting a true dark black with Inktense can be a little more difficult. And if that's the case, I just come back in with my Prismacolor as my last step and darken up my blacks, because that'll really give you a nice intense black. So this butterfly toward the center of the body is very dark. So I'm gonna make it so. Not too much a stay in the lines kind of person either. I've noticed this about myself. It could be a problem. I kind of just don't worry about it. I am normally a perfectionist in my life, but I guess with my coloring, I just like to let things unfold a little bit. Should just be fun, right? I have to sharpen this pencil up to get at the top of the wing there. Now I've noticed that at the beginning, often my coloring pages don't look like anything. Sometimes they don't look like anything when I'm done either. But often when I'm starting, I'm like, oh, yikes. The temptation could be there to give up, right? Like, this is not going that well. But stick with it. See what happens. Keep layering. Give the process time. I'm just going to gradually fade out this black with a little less pressure as I go along toward the outside. So come through here, I'm just going to darken basically the veins a little bit. I'm not worrying too much about being overly precise. And I can come back and accent those again too, once this is totally dry. Now blending black can be a bit tricky. And like I said, this paper is not very porous, so it's not going to let me endlessly apply color. It's just going to start picking it up again. But I do want to make sure I get it wet enough to totally activate. First, I'm going to do those colors, or those sections where I want to reserve some white. So I want to make sure that that is preserved. This, I might actually need a smaller brush to come back in. So I'll save that for a second. I'm going to work around my white spot there. You'll want to blot off plenty of times when you're working with black. Okay, I'm going to come in and hit this kind of orange area first. Make sure I can kind of preserve some of those tones of orange before I go too crazy with my blacks. Okay, and then I'll start working along the edges. And working in the smallest section you can manage within the image is really helpful. So I might kind of follow these areas with the vein lines. I just want to make sure that I get this wet enough that all the color activates. That way when I come back in and add more, I'm not picking up color from my last pass as well, if that makes sense. To do that, we just have to make sure all the color gets wet enough. When I get to that orange, I'm blotting off before I go over it again. Because I don't want to get too much black into that area. Like I said, black can be a bit tricky because it kind of likes to activate over and over again. It's really pigmented. You do have to get it pretty wet. And then just keep dabbing off because it always wants somewhere to go. And it'll go everywhere you touch if you don't blot off between. So basically all that black gradient that you're seeing there was created with just the pressure of my pencil. So you can see this got much darker as we go toward the center because I just pressed harder. When I have a really pigmented color, sometimes I find it helpful to work in little circles when I'm activating it. Seems to keep it in the area I want a little better. Not staying in the lines very well there. I warned you about that earlier, didn't I? So remember, anytime you go back to a lighter area, make sure you blot off, because you can take all your color with you when you get to the new spot. You hear some pretty mourning doves outside my window. We have a lot of them in our neighborhood for some reason. Okay, now I'm working more again into my really dark black. I kind of work in some small circles, kind of keep that color under control. I'm not staying inside my lines very well. Not at all. That is the beauty of it. I don't have to because it's my page, right? All right, now I am actually going to take a smaller brush. And it's handy to have a few sizes of these water brushes in case you need to get into really fine areas like this, because I want to preserve kind of that yellow stripe. That runs across the top of my wing there. All right. Got one more little spot here. Again, I'm going to work in really small circles because I want to get that nice and wet. I don't want it moving on me when I come back and add some more orange around it. The great thing about Inktense is once it's wet, it's set. As long as you've gotten it wet enough. Okay, nice. So I feel like my black is pretty high in contrast, which is what I want. That's really good. Now what I need to do with my orange, I think, because it looks a little dull to me, is come back in with some of my brighter colors. The rest of this page is really saturated, so this is where I might get away from my reference photo just a bit and let my own creativity kind of take over. I'm going to add a whole bunch more orange to these outside areas, but the great thing about blocking in your colors before you start, kind of just getting a rough outline and then coming back in and adding more layers, is that you can really see where you want more color to happen. Definitely going to make these wings a little brighter yellow, or these spots up here. Same with these. Just going to come back in and add a whole bunch more color. Let's add a little more tangerine here. Like I said, on this paper, I'm getting 2 to 3. I probably don't want to do more than 3. So if I want a lot of color here, I'm going to really give a lot of pressure. I'm going to color with a heavy hand to get a lot of deep color there. Just going to bring a little more orange out further, just for a little more pop of color here. Once you've blocked it in, kind of given yourself a good outline of where you want to go, you often will see, like, this is what I need to do next. If you're just observing, you'll be able to tell. Add some more willow at the end. Again, with a pretty dang heavy hand. Okay. I'm going to add some baked earth to these sections. I don't use a heavy hand on my first pass usually, because I kind of want to see where things are going to go and how they're going to unfold, if that makes sense. I usually save that for my second or third layer. Hit all the spots I want to hit before I'm done. Add just a tiny bit of orange around my yellow here, just to give it some pizzazz. Then I'm going to go over all this section. I talked a little earlier about how I sometimes go over a whole section with my light color just to kind of make it a bit more coherent. That's what I'm going to do here. So I do want this to be pretty bright. Okay, let's see what we get there. I'm also going to do a little brightening on this area out here. This is why I want to make sure my blacks are really activated, because I want to be able to go back in, add a little more orange here if I need to. It's another great thing about Inktense is you can work on with some toning, because usually once it's wet, it's set. My blacks, I find, I can go over them a few times with water and they may still pick up, just because coloring book paper is not watercolor paper. Okay, let's start with some of these little areas. Hopefully this will brighten up my oranges a bit. I want something really vibrant here. Starting light again and going into the dark. A little advance and retreat. That brightened those up a lot, didn't it? That's more like what I want. Remember to blot off as you move from your dark color to your lighter one, if you're reblending at all. I'm always afraid I'm going to blot off on my actual page just because I'm so used to having my blending towel in one spot. Someday I'm going to forget to put it there and just blend off on my page. Now I don't think I can go over that center area too much more. I may actually go in and add another round of orange just to my little spots there so that they're just about as bright, as vibrant as that one. But that's my basic process on blocking in my color values. The other step I might go to is to come back in with some Prismacolor, some really firm tipped Prismacolor, and just see if I can add some veining here with some really fine lines. But I hope you've enjoyed seeing kind of this next step of how I would approach this page. Again, if you're interested in this book, you can check the affiliate link in the description below. I'll have all the info there. I will have a list of the colors I used as well. I will have a link to Blick Art Supplies, an affiliate link there. So if you're interested in some Inktense, you can find that. I'll link to some water brushes that I think might be a good choice for you. And then of course, be sure to leave a comment below with your current work in progress and the book it comes from. As long as you live in the US, that will enter you for a giveaway for this book from Colorit. Huge thanks to Colorit for that. I hope you have enjoyed seeing today's video. Whether we have a part 3 on this or not, I'm not sure, but check me out on Instagram if you want to see where this goes from here. As always, spread some joy wherever you are, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.